Chapter 17, The Fifth Element, Integration and Transcendence. The emergence of wholeness. Imagine standing at the center of a magnificent cathedral where shafts of multicolored light stream through stained glass windows. Each beam carries its distinctive hue, the rich brown gold of earth, the brilliant red-orange of fire, the clear blue-white of air, the deep blue-green of water, creating separate pathways of illumination throughout the space. Yet in the very center, where these individual rays converge, something extraordinary happens. The separate colors merge into a luminous presence that is neither the simple addition of the original hues nor their mutual cancellation, but rather a radiant white light containing all colors while transcending their individual expressions. A fifth presence emerging from the integration of the original four. This convergence offers a profound metaphor for understanding the quintessential element that emerges when the four primary elements achieve genuine balance and integration. What philosophers and mystics throughout history have identified as ether, quintessence, spirit, or consciousness can be understood not as a separate element existing alongside the others, but as an emergent quality arising from their harmonious interaction, the whole that proves greater than the sum of its elemental parts, the transcendent dimension that both contains and exceeds the original components from which it emerges. In this chapter, we'll explore this mysterious fifth element not as an esoteric concept beyond practical reach, but as a lived experience available through conscious integration of the four primary elements we've examined throughout this book. We'll consider how this quintessence appears across philosophical traditions, examine how modern psychological research illuminates transcendent states, and chart the developmental journey from elemental awareness to integrated wholeness. This exploration bridges ancient wisdom with contemporary understanding without requiring allegiance to any particular spiritual framework. The transcendent quality we seek doesn't require addition of something currently absent, but rather recognition of what already exists when the elements within us achieve harmonious relationship. Like a skilled conductor who doesn't create new notes, but facilitates their integration into a symphony beyond what individual instruments could produce alone, our consciousness can orchestrate elemental harmony that reveals previously unrecognized wholeness already present within our multidimensional nature. Beyond the four, the quintessence across traditions. Throughout human history, philosophical and spiritual traditions worldwide have recognized that beyond the tangible elements lies another dimension, more subtle yet more fundamental, that both encompasses and transcends the material world. This recognition appears across diverse cultures and epochs, suggesting something universal in human experience rather than merely cultural construction. Historical and philosophical concepts of the fifth element. In Western thought, Aristotle's concept of ether represented perhaps the most influential conception of this fifth element. In his cosmology, Aristotle distinguished between the terrestrial elements, earth, water, air, fire, subject to change and decay, and the celestial ether, an unchanging, perfect substance comprising the heavenly bodies. Unlike the four terrestrial elements characterized by particular qualities, hot, cold, wet, dry, ether transcended these dualities, representing pure, eternal substance beyond corruption. In the Vedic tradition, Akasha offered a similar understanding from an entirely different cultural context. Within Hindu philosophy, particularly Samkhya cosmology, Akasha represented the first and most fundamental of the five great elements, Pancha Mahabhuta. Unlike the other four elements associated with specific sensory qualities, Akasha associated with sound represented space itself, the container within which all other elements existed. The Chinese Wu Xing system presented a more dynamic understanding through its five-element system: wood, fire, earth, metal, water. While lacking an explicit fifth element transcending the others, this tradition emphasized the center or soil element as a stabilizing influence within the continuous cycle of elemental transformations. This central element represented not a static substance, but a dynamic balance point, facilitating harmonious relationship among all elements. Medieval and Renaissance alchemists sought to extract the quintessence, or fifth essence, from material substances, the perfect, incorruptible essence transcending the four elemental qualities while containing their virtues in purified form. This quintessence represented not merely an additional element, but a transformative principle capable of perfecting the other elements, turning lead to gold literally in laboratory operations and metaphorically in psychological transformation. These diverse traditions, despite their different contexts and expressions, converge on a remarkably similar understanding. Beyond the tangible, changeable elements exists another dimension that both transcends and unifies them, serving simultaneously as their source, container, and perfection. This cross-cultural recognition suggests not mere coincidence of thought but perception of a fundamental pattern within both cosmos and consciousness. Modern interpretations, consciousness as integration, contemporary understanding offers fresh perspectives on this ancient wisdom without requiring metaphysical frameworks potentially incompatible with modern worldviews. Consciousness as quintessence provides perhaps the most accessible modern interpretation of this fifth element. Rather than positing a mysterious substance beyond scientific understanding, this approach recognizes consciousness itself, our aware presence capable of experiencing all elements while identified with none exclusively, as the integrative dimension ancient traditions attempted to describe. Integration as emergent property offers a systems-based understanding drawing from complexity science and developmental psychology. This approach views quintessence not as a separate element, but as an emergent quality arising when elemental components achieve sufficient harmony and interaction. Like water manifesting properties irreducible to its constituent hydrogen and oxygen, the fifth element emerges from balanced relationship among the original four while exhibiting qualities belonging to none individually. Psychological wholeness translates these ancient concepts into modern therapeutic understanding through frameworks like Jung's individuation process, Maslow's self-actualization, or contemporary models of psychological integration. These approaches recognize that human development naturally moves toward increasing integration of previously fragmented aspects, creating increasingly unified consciousness. Transpersonal dimension acknowledges experiences transcending conventional personal boundaries while remaining accessible through direct experience. Research in contemplative neuroscience, flow states, and peak experiences demonstrates how ordinary consciousness can temporarily access broader awareness beyond separate selfhood. States characterized by expanded identity, reduced self-reference, and increased connection with larger systems. These contemporary frameworks offer meaningful understanding of quintessence without requiring acceptance of pre-modern cosmologies. They translate ancient wisdom into modern language while preserving its essential insight. Beyond the separate elements lies an integrative dimension that both contains and transcends them, accessible through balanced relationship among the primary elements.
The emergence of quintessence through balance. Rather than existing alongside or above the four elements, quintessence emerges through their balanced integration, not an additional ingredient but a new quality manifesting through harmonious relationship. Transcendence through integration reveals how quintessential consciousness emerges not through escaping elemental reality but through fully inhabiting all elements in balanced relationship. When Earth's embodied stability, fire's transformative energy, air's clear perspective, and water's flowing depth achieve dynamic harmony rather than fragmented competition, consciousness naturally expands beyond exclusive identification with any single element. Elemental complementarity creates wholeness through balanced relationship between apparent opposites. Earth and air complement each other through practicality and perspective, stability and flexibility, groundedness and spaciousness. Fire and water similarly balance each other through activation and receptivity, transformation and flow, expression and connection. When these complementary pairs achieve harmonious relationship rather than oppositional struggle, their integration creates psychological space transcending their apparent contradictions. Dynamic balance rather than static perfection characterizes this quintessential emergence. The fifth element manifests not as rigid equilibrium where all elements receive exactly equal expression regardless of circumstance, but as fluid responsiveness where each element contributes appropriately to particular situations while maintaining harmonic relationship with the others. Like a skilled surfer constantly adjusting position to remain centered amid changing waves, this dynamic balance requires continuous awareness and adaptation. Developmental emergence reveals quintessence as a natural outcome of psychological maturation. Early development typically progresses through phases emphasizing particular elements: earth security needs in infancy, fire's autonomy in toddlerhood, air's conceptual understanding in childhood, water's emotional and relational depth in adolescence, before integration becomes the primary developmental task of maturity. This emergence perspective transforms quintessence from mysterious substance into recognizable experience accessible through conscious integration of dimensions we already contain. The transcendent quality we seek doesn't require addition of a currently missing component but rather balanced relationship among existing aspects of our multidimensional nature. Scientific ground: research on integrated states. Contemporary research increasingly validates ancient wisdom about transcendent consciousness through empirical investigation of states historically associated with spiritual traditions. Flow state research pioneered by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi documents a distinctive psychological condition characterized by complete absorption, effortless attention, altered time perception, and transcendence of separate self-consciousness. These states, accessible through activities ranging from athletic performance to artistic creation, intellectual exploration to contemplative practice, demonstrate many qualities historically attributed to the fifth element. Flow requires specific conditions that reflect elemental balance, sufficient challenge to engage fire without triggering anxiety, enough skill to engage earth without generating boredom. Clear goals and feedback that satisfy air's need for understanding, and intrinsic enjoyment that fulfills water's requirement for meaningful engagement. When these conditions align, consciousness shifts from fragmented attention caught between competing elements to unified awareness where elements function as an integrated system. The effortless attention characteristic of flow states demonstrates how elemental integration transforms conscious experience. Unlike fragmented awareness continuously shifting between competing demands, flow consciousness unifies these dimensions into seamless attention where thinking and doing, feeling and acting merge into a unified process requiring no divided attention or executive control. Contemplative neuroscience examines brain activity during meditative states across diverse traditions. This research consistently identifies particular patterns associated with advanced meditation, increased integration between brain regions, reduced activity in the default mode network associated with self-referential processing, and distinctive gamma wave synchrony indicating heightened coherence. Advanced meditators show neurological patterns that reflect unified elemental functioning, robust earth activation in insular regions governing interoceptive awareness, balanced fire engagement through regulated limbic activation, clear air functioning through enhanced prefrontal integration, and healthy water expression through increased connectivity between emotional and cognitive systems. These patterns represent not esoteric achievement but measurable integration of neural systems corresponding to elemental dimensions. Mystical experience studies conducted by researchers like Roland Griffiths at Johns Hopkins University systematically investigate profound unitive experiences historically considered spiritual revelations. Whether occurring spontaneously, through contemplative practice, or occasioned by psychedelics, these experiences demonstrate remarkably consistent features across diverse populations: sense of undifferentiated unity, transcendence of space and time, profound sense of sacredness, and noutic quality of direct knowing. These experiences typically involve dissolution of boundaries between elemental aspects of experience that normally appear separate, between self and other, thought and feeling, being and doing, individual and universal. This dissolution doesn't reflect confusion or regression but rather recognition of more fundamental unity underlying apparent separation, precisely the quintessential consciousness described across wisdom traditions. Post-traumatic growth research documents how significant life challenges sometimes catalyze profound positive transformation beyond mere recovery or resilience. These growth experiences typically include expanded sense of possibility, deeper connection with others, increased appreciation for life, enhanced personal strength, and spiritual development, precisely the qualities associated with quintessential consciousness in traditions worldwide. This research transforms ancient wisdom about quintessence from metaphysical speculation into empirically observable phenomenon, not proving traditional spiritual claims about cosmic substance but demonstrating that states historically described as transcendent correspond with distinctive psychological and neurobiological patterns. These patterns are accessible through identifiable practices and conditions. Paradox, foundation and culmination. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the fifth element across traditions involves its simultaneous position as both original source and ultimate achievement, both the foundation from which elemental manifestation emerges and the culmination toward which elemental integration leads. Prior unity recognizes consciousness as both beginning point and destination of the developmental journey. The awareness we gradually uncover through elemental integration represents not a newly created quality but recognition of what was always already present, the fundamental consciousness temporarily obscured through exclusive identification with particular elemental expressions. Like water appearing as distinct ice, liquid, and vapor forms while maintaining essential nature, consciousness adopts various elemental expressions while retaining fundamental unity prior to these apparent separations. The journey from self to self characterizes spiritual traditions worldwide, which consistently describe a developmental path leading from unconscious wholeness through necessary differentiation and back to conscious integration, not returning to the original state, but spiraling to a new level where original unity becomes consciously recognized rather than merely unconsciously inhabited. Both transcendent and immanent dimensions characterize quintessential consciousness, which simultaneously encompasses and pervades the elements without being limited to any particular manifestation. This consciousness transcends specific elemental expressions through its comprehensive inclusivity while remaining immanently present within each element as their essential nature. Like an ocean simultaneously transcending individual waves through its vastness while remaining immanently present as their substance, quintessential awareness both exceeds and constitutes all elemental manifestations. Already a not yet paradox acknowledges how quintessence exists simultaneously as always present foundation requiring no development and as potential fruition requiring conscious cultivation. This paradoxical understanding recognizes that while unified consciousness represents our fundamental nature needing no improvement, our conscious recognition and embodiment of this inherent wholeness requires the developmental journey through elemental integration. This paradoxical understanding transforms spiritual development from linear progression toward distant goal into circular journey of recognizing what was never actually absent but merely overlooked through partial attention. Not adding a missing component but removing obstacles to recognition of inherent wholeness always already present as our fundamental nature. Emergent wholeness, more than sum of parts. Beyond merely collecting the four elements in a convenient arrangement, true integration creates emergent properties, new qualities arising from their relationship that exist in none of the elements individually. Emergence principle from complexity science explains how interactions between simpler components can generate higher-order properties not predictable from component analysis alone. Just as billions of neurons create consciousness that cannot be located in any individual cell, elemental integration creates unified awareness transcending separate elemental properties while emerging entirely from their dynamic interaction. Self-organization dynamics reveal how complex systems naturally develop increasing coherence through ongoing interaction without external control or central direction. Left to regular interaction under appropriate conditions, initially separate elements tend toward mutually supportive patterns that maximize system stability while permitting necessary flexibility, precisely the balance traditions worldwide identify with wisdom. Nonlinear development characterizes psychological growth toward integration, with significant leaps in consciousness often following extended periods of apparent stagnation or regression. Unlike mechanical systems where input and output remain proportionally related, conscious development frequently demonstrates discontinuous jumps, threshold effects where quantitative changes in elemental balance suddenly trigger qualitative shifts in awareness. Irreducibility of the whole emphasizes how integrated consciousness cannot be fully understood through analysis of its elemental components, just as musical harmony cannot be adequately explained through isolated examination of individual notes. While each element contributes essential qualities to integrated consciousness, their combined effect creates an experience that transcends mere aggregation of separate contributions. When elements achieve genuine integration rather than mere coexistence, distinctive qualities emerge that transcend individual elemental characteristics. Wisdom beyond knowledge emerges when Earth's practical understanding and air's conceptual knowledge integrate with fire's intuitive insight and water's emotional intelligence. This unified knowing transcends both concrete information and abstract theory, manifesting as comprehensive understanding that simultaneously grasps conceptual principles, practical applications, meaningful purpose, and emotional significance. Compassionate strength develops when fire's courage and decisive action integrate with water's empathic sensitivity and emotional attunement. This balanced quality transcends both impassioned action without sufficient sensitivity and empathic understanding without effective response, creating engaged compassion that remains simultaneously powerful and receptive. Grounded openness arises when Earth's stability and embodied presence integrate with air's flexibility and expansive perspective. This balanced quality transcends both rigid fixity without adaptability and ungrounded conceptualization without practical foundation, creating perspective that remains simultaneously stable and adaptive. Purposeful flow emerges when fire's directed intention and meaningful purpose integrate with water's receptive adaptability and intuitive attunement. This balanced quality transcends both rigid attachment to predetermined outcomes and passive surrender to circumstance, creating purposeful engagement that remains simultaneously directed and responsive. These emergent qualities demonstrate how elemental integration creates distinctive consciousness irreducible to component analysis, not through addition of mysterious substance but through transformation of relationship between existing elements from fragmented competition into dynamic harmony, where each element enhances rather than diminishes the others.
Stages of integration, the developmental path. The journey toward quintessential consciousness follows recognizable developmental stages as elements move from separation toward integration. While each person's path remains unique, certain patterns appear consistently across diverse traditions and contemporary developmental frameworks. Hagkai. Elemental discovery. Recognizing the journey begins with elemental discovery, recognizing the distinct qualities of earth, fire, air, and water within your experience. This initial stage involves developing awareness of how these fundamental energies manifest in your physical sensations, emotional responses, thought patterns, and relational dynamics. This recognition frequently begins through noticing elemental imbalance, perhaps excessive air manifesting as anxiety without sufficient earth grounding, diminished fire appearing as depression without motivational energy, overwhelming water emerging as emotional flooding without adequate containment, or dominant earth creating rigid stability without transformative capacity. Such elemental recognition transforms previously confusing psychological experiences into intelligible patterns requiring specific adjustments rather than merely problematic states to eliminate. This newfound understanding creates foundation for subsequent development by revealing both natural strengths and potential growth edges within your elemental constitution. Elemental cultivation, developing deficient elements. With basic elemental recognition established, development typically proceeds through deliberate cultivation of deficient elements, those natural energies least available within your constitutional makeup or most suppressed through environmental conditioning. This cultivation involves systematic development of capacities previously neglected or underdeveloped, perhaps strengthening Earth's practical groundedness if naturally oriented toward abstract thinking, developing fire's passionate engagement if constitutionally cautious, cultivating air's clear perspective if predominantly emotional, or deepening water's feeling capacity if naturally logical and detached. Such deliberate cultivation requires targeted practices appropriate to specific elemental deficiencies, embodiment practices for earth development, motivation techniques for fire enhancement, cognitive clarity methods for air strengthening, or emotional attunement approaches for water deepening. These practices systematically address imbalances through intentional focus on elements requiring development beyond their natural baseline in your particular constitution. Elemental relationship, creating balance between elements. Beyond individual elemental development, integration requires establishing balanced relationship between previously separated or conflicting elements. This stage involves consciously bringing together dimensions of experience often experienced as contradictory or incompatible. Balancing earth and fire means establishing harmony between stability and transformation, security and risk, conservation and change. Finding sustainable rhythm that allows both grounded consistency and passionate engagement rather than sacrificing either for the other. Integrating air and water involves reconciling clear thinking with emotional depth, logical analysis with intuitive knowing, conceptual understanding with felt experience, creating perspective that honors both rational discernment and non-rational wisdom, without privileging either at the other's expense. Harmonizing earth and air requires bridging practical reality with conceptual understanding, embodied presence with mental clarity, tangible experience with abstract thought, developing approach that remains simultaneously grounded in physical reality and capable of theoretical understanding. Unifying fire and water means integrating passionate action with emotional attunement, directed purpose with receptive awareness, transformative energy with flowing adaptability. Manifesting engagement that remains simultaneously powerful and sensitive without compromising either quality. This relational stage transforms elemental development from separate cultivation of individual elements into conscious integration of complementary pairs, creating increasingly harmonious interaction between previously fragmented aspects of experience. An elemental fluidity, dynamic responsiveness. As elemental relationships develop, integration progresses toward increasingly fluid responsiveness, the capacity to access each element appropriately according to changing circumstances without fixed identification with particular elemental preference. This fluidity manifests as ability to shift between elemental emphases as situations require, engaging Earth's stability when groundedness serves present need, expressing fire's transformation when change becomes necessary, employing air's perspective when clarity proves essential, or manifesting water's depth when emotional connection becomes primary. Unlike earlier stages characterized by conscious effort toward elemental development or deliberate attention to elemental relationships, this fluid stage demonstrates increasing ease and naturalness in elemental expression. What previously required deliberate practice increasingly becomes spontaneous response arising from integrated consciousness rather than compartmentalized effort. This fluidity transforms elemental mastery from mechanical application of separate techniques into artistic expression of unified consciousness capable of manifesting each element's distinctive qualities without becoming exclusively identified with or separated from any particular elemental dimension. Quintessential awareness, transcendent integration. The culmination of elemental integration manifests as quintessential awareness, consciousness that simultaneously transcends and includes all elemental qualities while identified exclusively with none. This awareness recognizes itself as the spacious container within which all elemental experiences arise, exist, and dissolve, rather than identifying with any particular content of consciousness. Unlike earlier stages characterized by doing something with or to the elements, this quintessential awareness rests in being the consciousness within which all elemental expressions manifest. This shift from doing to being, from achievement to recognition, represents fundamental transformation in relationship with elemental experience. This quintessential awareness demonstrates several distinctive qualities across contemplative traditions. Non-dual perception, that recognizes apparent opposites as complementary expressions of unified reality, rather than contradictory forces. Stability and change, thinking and feeling, individual and collective, material and spiritual, all recognized as different aspects of integrated wholeness rather than competing alternatives requiring choice. Witnessing presence, that maintains clear awareness regardless of changing elemental states, neither identified with nor rejecting any particular experience, but remaining spacious enough to allow all expressions while bound by none exclusively. Spontaneous compassion, that naturally responds to suffering without deliberate cultivation. Caring action emerging not from learned technique or conscious intention, but from authentic recognition of fundamental connection, transcending apparent separation between self and other. Effortless ethics, that manifests appropriate behavior without rule-following or restraint. Right action flowing naturally from integrated consciousness rather than imposed control or external compliance. This quintessential awareness represents not supernatural achievement beyond ordinary humanity, but natural culmination of developmental potential, when elements achieve sufficient integration to reveal the consciousness that has always contained them, not adding new component, but recognizing the aware presence that has witnessed all elemental expressions
Practices
throughout
for
our journey.
cultivating quintessential consciousness. While quintessential awareness ultimately emerges through grace rather than achievement, certain practices have traditionally supported its recognition across diverse contemplative paths. Integrated meditation, beyond technique. Traditional contemplative paths worldwide recognize that advanced meditation transcends specific techniques to become direct resting in quintessential awareness itself. This non-dual meditation differs fundamentally from earlier stage practices focused on developing particular qualities. Unlike concentration practices that develop focused attention, primarily air and fire qualities, integrated meditation rests in spacious awareness that neither grasps nor rejects any content of consciousness. Unlike analytical meditation that develops clear understanding, primarily air qualities, integrated meditation releases conceptual frameworks to rest in direct recognition beyond categorization or interpretation. Unlike heart-centered practices that cultivate specific emotions, primarily water qualities, integrated meditation allows all feeling states to arise, exist, and dissolve within unconditioned awareness without preference or rejection. Unlike embodiment practices that develop physical presence, primarily earth qualities, integrated meditation recognizes consciousness that witnesses even embodied experience without becoming exclusively identified with physical sensation. This integrated approach maintains no particular agenda for consciousness to achieve specific state, quality, or outcome, simply resting in the awareness that already exists prior to any effort to change, develop, or transcend ordinary experience. Paradoxical instruction, beyond conceptual understanding. Across contemplative traditions, teachers working with advanced students often employ paradoxical instruction that deliberately confounds conceptual understanding to facilitate recognition beyond analytical comprehension. Zen koans present logical contradictions impossible to resolve through conceptual thinking, creating cognitive openings where intellectual understanding surrenders to direct recognition beyond conceptual categories. Non-dual teachings emphasize not that approaches that systematically negate all possible descriptions of quintessential awareness, preventing conceptual mind from reducing direct recognition to limited understanding. Poetic transmission through metaphor, symbol, and artistic expression communicates quintessential understanding through channels that bypass analytical thinking, activating intuitive recognition rather than conceptual comprehension. Transmission beyond words through presence, silence, or direct pointing invites recognition of awareness that precedes and transcends verbal articulation, revealing quintessence through immediate experience rather than symbolic representation. These approaches acknowledge fundamental limitation of conceptual instruction for communicating quintessential awareness, like describing water to someone who has never experienced wetness, or explaining color to someone who has never seen. They point toward direct recognition that ultimately transcends even the most sophisticated conceptual understanding. Life as practice, beyond formal methods. While formal meditation provides essential foundation for quintessential recognition, advanced integration ultimately extends beyond designated practice periods into continuous awareness throughout daily activity. Choiceless awareness during ordinary activities, neither controlling experience to achieve particular state nor passively surrendering to unconscious patterns but remaining consciously present with whatever arises without predetermined agenda or fixed identification. Engaged presence in relationships, neither strategically managing interactions nor reactively responding from habitual patterns but remaining authentically available to genuine connection while conscious of projections, expectations, and assumptions that typically distort relational experience. Responsive action in challenging situations, neither imposing rigid predetermined plans nor passively accepting circumstances but allowing appropriate response to emerge from clear seeing unclouded by fear, attachment, or aversion. Natural ethics in decision-making, neither following external rules nor indulging unconscious impulses but allowing choices to emerge from integrated wisdom that naturally recognizes appropriate action without forced compliance or deliberate restraint. This continuous practice transforms quintessential awareness from special state accessible only during formal practice into natural expression throughout daily living, not extraordinary achievement but recognition of ordinary awareness that has always been present within every experience, regardless of its content or quality. Community and relationship as integration catalysts. While quintessential awareness ultimately represents direct recognition requiring no mediation, relationships and community provide essential context supporting its emergence. Mirror reflection through authentic relationship with others who reflect both our elemental imbalances and our quintessential nature, providing feedback that highlights blind spots while simultaneously recognizing fundamental wholeness beyond current limitations. Collective field that emerges when multiple individuals gather with shared intention toward integration, creating energetic container that supports recognition beyond what isolated practice might access alone through resonance between aligned consciousness. Transmission lineage connecting contemporary practitioners with those who previously walked similar path, providing guidance, verification, and context that helps distinguish authentic recognition from conceptual understanding or temporary states. Service engagement that expresses quintessential awareness through meaningful contribution, not as means for self-improvement but as natural manifestation of integrated consciousness that spontaneously responds to suffering with appropriate action. These relational contexts transform spiritual development from isolated achievement into collective emergence, recognizing that quintessential consciousness manifests not merely within individual awareness but through the interconnected field of consciousness that transcends apparent separation while includes all unique expressions.
And the unfolding journey from concept to living reality. Understanding quintessential consciousness conceptually represents valuable beginning, but true integration requires progressive embodiment beyond intellectual comprehension. Transformation from knowing about wholeness to living from integrated awareness. Ashan from learning to direct experience. Initial understanding typically begins through conceptual learning, reading descriptions, studying traditions, or intellectually comprehending elemental relationships. While valuable for orientation, this conceptual understanding remains fundamentally different from direct recognition. The essential shift from concept to experience often occurs through practices that temporarily suspend analytical thinking. Meditation, embodied movement, creative expression, contemplative inquiry, creating space where direct experience can emerge without immediate conceptual categorization or interpretation. This experiential knowing differs qualitatively from conceptual understanding. Like difference between reading about swimming and actually feeling water's support, between studying music theory and directly experiencing harmony, between analyzing love and being fully present in loving relationship. From glimpses to stabilization. Direct experiences of quintessential awareness typically begin as temporary glimpses, brief recognitions during meditation, momentary experiences during flow states, occasional insights during contemplative inquiry. While transformative, these initial experiences often fade when returning to ordinary activities. The developmental journey involves progressive stabilization, extending recognition from temporary experiences into increasingly sustained awareness across diverse contexts and challenges. This stabilization typically develops through cycles of recognition, loss, and rediscovery rather than linear progression. Like learning any complex skill, this stabilization depends on repetition that gradually transforms conscious effort into natural capacity, hours of practice ultimately yielding effortless expression, deliberate attention developing into spontaneous awareness, intentional integration becoming natural responsiveness. From personal achievement to universal recognition, early stages of spiritual development often involve sense of personal achievement, measuring progress, comparing experiences, seeking validation for attainments. This individualistic orientation gradually transforms through deepening recognition that quintessential awareness represents not personal accomplishment, but universal consciousness temporarily identified with particular form. This shift transforms practitioners' relationship with development from achievement orientation to humble participation in natural unfolding, not improving personal consciousness, but removing obstacles to recognition of awareness that transcends yet includes personal identity. The paradoxical culmination of this journey reveals that what seemed like progressive development toward distant goal actually represented gradual recognition of what was never absent. The awareness witnessing the entire journey was itself the quintessence being sought through years of practice. From spiritual pursuit to natural expression. For many practitioners, spiritual development begins a separate domain alongside ordinary life. Designated practices, special insights, particular experiences distinct from conventional activities. This separation gradually dissolves as quintessential awareness increasingly permeates ordinary existence. The ultimate integration manifests not as perpetual extraordinary state, but as natural presence within ordinary experience, washing dishes, engaging conversations, performing work tasks, navigating challenges, all become expressions of the same awareness previously sought through special practices. This integration transforms spirituality from specialized pursuit into fundamental context that informs all dimensions of human experience, not separate achievement but natural expression of quintessential consciousness through particular form, with its unique capabilities, limitations, relationships, and contributions. Living from wholeness, the fifth element in daily life. Beyond theoretical understanding or temporary experiences, quintessential awareness ultimately manifests through transformed relationship with everyday existence. Not escape from ordinary reality, but conscious participation in life through integrated perspective. A decision-making from integrated awareness. Quintessential consciousness transforms decision-making process from fragmented calculation to integrated discernment. Rather than mechanical weighing of pros and cons or exclusive reliance on either analytical thinking or emotional preference, decisions emerge through whole system intelligence that incorporates Earth's practical wisdom about tangible implications, resource requirements, and embodied effects alongside fire's purposeful direction, passionate engagement, and transformative potential. Air's clear perspective, multiple viewpoints, and conceptual understanding alongside water's emotional resonance, intuitive guidance, and relational awareness. This integrated approach accesses wisdom beyond what any single elemental perspective could provide, neither abandoning rational analysis nor ignoring emotional intelligence, neither dismissing practical concerns nor sacrificing meaningful purpose, but allowing decisions to emerge from their harmonious integration. At relationships through quintessential lens. Integrated consciousness transforms relationship from strategic management or unconscious reactivity into authentic connection that simultaneously honors both shared unity and genuine difference. This balanced perspective recognizes fundamental connection that transcends apparent separation, without diminishing unique individuality, appreciating both universal consciousness manifesting through particular forms and distinctive qualities emerging through those manifestations. Such relationships maintain creative tension between intimacy and autonomy, connection and independence, shared purpose and individual expression, not through compromise that diminishes both poles, but through integration that honors the paradoxical truth of simultaneous unity and diversity. Child, meaningful contribution, beyond ego gratification, quintessential awareness transforms work and service from either ego-driven achievement or obligatory duty into natural expression of inherent gifts in response to recognized needs, not driven primarily by personal ambition, external validation, or comparative status, but by authentic recognition of how particular capabilities might appropriately address actual situations. Not motivated by obligatory self-sacrifice, codependent helping, or moral imperative, but by spontaneous response, emerging from recognition of fundamental connection, transcending apparent separation between self and other. This integrated approach manifests as contribution that simultaneously serves both individual fulfillment and collective well-being, not sacrificing personal joy for others' needs, nor pursuing individual satisfaction at others' expense, but recognizing how authentic expression naturally benefits both self and others through their inseparable connection. Suffering and joy through integrated perspective. Perhaps most profoundly, quintessential consciousness transforms relationship with inevitable suffering and joy that characterize human experience, neither clinging to pleasant experiences nor rejecting painful ones, but recognizing both as temporary expressions within awareness that remains unchanged by their appearance or disappearance, neither seeking perpetual happiness as goal of spiritual practice, nor accepting unnecessary suffering as inevitable fate, but engaging both with presence that neither grasps nor rejects whatever arises in experience. This balanced perspective doesn't eliminate pain or diminish joy, but transforms relationship with both through recognition of the awareness within which all experiences arise and dissolve, remaining fully engaged with life's intensity while identified with the consciousness that witnesses, rather than particular experiences witnessed. The ongoing unfolding, never complete, already whole, the quintessential journey represents not finite achievement with clear endpoint, but ongoing unfoldment that continues throughout lifetime. Not static perfection, but dynamic balance continuously responding to changing circumstances through integrated wisdom. This perspective recognizes paradoxical truth that spiritual development remains simultaneously never complete and already whole, always unfolding through greater embodiment and expression while already perfect in its fundamental nature. Like fractal pattern that maintains same essential structure at every scale while continuously elaborating new expressions, quintessential consciousness remains fundamentally complete in its aware nature, while endlessly manifesting through unique circumstances, relationships, challenges, and contributions that constitute individual human journey. This recognition transforms spiritual path from seeking distant goal to participating in continuous unfoldment of what has always been present, not striving toward future achievement, but embodying with increasing faithfulness the quintessential awareness that witnesses the entire journey while remaining untouched by its changing expressions. And final reflection, the circle completes. We began this exploration with separate examination of 4 elemental energies: Earth's embodied stability, Fire's transformative power, Air's clear perspective, and Water's flowing depth, acknowledging their distinctive qualities and contributions to human experience. Our journey now returns to where it began, recognizing that these apparently separate elements always existed as expressions of unified consciousness, temporarily appearing as distinct energies, like white light refracted through prism into separate colors that maintain their source's essential nature despite apparent division. This completion reveals the quintessential truth. The consciousness reading these words existed before elemental division and remains present after their integration, neither improved through development nor diminished through limitation, but continuously expressing through ever-changing forms while remaining unchanging in its fundamental nature. This recognition represents not conclusion, but beginning, not final achievement, but foundation for living with increasing faithfulness to the wholeness that has always been our deepest nature, manifesting through the particular gifts, challenges, relationships, and contributions that constitute our unique expression of the quintessential consciousness we all share. Journal reflection questions. 1. When have you experienced moments of integration where the four elements seem to work in harmony rather than competition? What qualities characterize these experiences? 2. Which complementary elemental pairs, earth-fire, air-water, earth-air, fire-water, currently seem most challenging to integrate in your experience? What practices might help bring these elements into better relationship? 3. How might you distinguish between intellectual understanding of wholeness and direct recognition of quintessential awareness? What experiences have given you glimpses beyond conceptual comprehension? 4. What daily life situations consistently challenge your integration, pulling you toward elemental fragmentation? How might quintessential awareness transform your relationship with these challenges? 5. If you were living more consistently from quintessential awareness, how might your relationships, work, decisions, and response to difficulties change? What qualities would become more prominent in your expression?